I don't think there's a character in fiction that does a better job of setting the tone for their respective work than Kuno does for Disco Elysium. He's rude, aggressive, obsessed with all the worst parts of Martinez, like death and drugs. And yet, he still manages to be both hilarious and an altogether sympathetic figure. For just a kid, he is an incredibly complex character, yet another triumph for a game that deserves nothing but praise for its fantastic writing. And he is incredibly important to the overall trajectory of Harry's journey. Through Kuno, Harry can learn about the impact that trauma has on a person, and that no matter how much he's screwed up himself, no matter how troubled his past may be, he can still help others who are going through incredible hardships of their own. But before I go on, if you are a Disco Elysium fan, please be sure to like, subscribe, and consider supporting me through a YouTube channel membership or over on Patreon. I'm really hoping I can leave teaching someday just like Harry did and focus on these videos full time. And by doing any of those things, you'll be helping make that dream a reality. We meet Kuno on Disco Elysium's very first day. Depending on how much of a completionist you are and how many dialogue options you ran through in the Whirling in Rags, you'll probably meet him about half an hour to an hour after firing up the game. The introduction to him is, well, grim, to put it lightly. Harry finds him in the backyard of the Whirling, throwing rocks at the corpse of the hanged man. Just, a normal kid thing to do. He's not swapping RCM trading cards with his buddies, or talking about who's going to win the upcoming football game between the Revachol Revolutionaries and the Mesk militiamen. He's using a dead body that's been stinking up his neighborhood for a week as target practice. If you can think of a more macabre introduction to a kid in a video game, let me know, because I sure can't. In any case, though Kuno spends most of his initial conversation with Harry mocking him, he calls him a pig and insults his weight and appearance, Harry does have the opportunity to win him over, at which point Kuno becomes a decent source of information. He doesn't tell Harry anything revelatory about the hanged man, but he's far from useless, as he points the detectives in the right direction on a few points, like when he tells them what he knows about the hanged man's missing clothes. For the most part, this is the mechanical function of Harry's interactions with Kuno. Nothing groundbreaking, but a place to check in about new leads and maybe get a clue about where to go or what to do next. The same is true if you decide to go cryptid hunting with Morel and Lena. Kuno will steal the locusts from the trap, potentially putting a damper on the cryptozoologist's dream. But when it happens again, he will let you know that it wasn't him, cluing you into the fact that there might be something more going on here after all. But the player's most intriguing interactions with Kuno potentially come during the third and final act of the game. If Kim is wounded during the tribunal, then Kuno will be there when Harry wakes up in the Whirling in Rags. After a barrage of some of his trademark mockery, he'll tell the detective that he's been off drugs for several days now, is going through withdrawal, and is doing his best to steer clear of Kuno S. It's a shame that this partnership is locked behind Kim getting wounded by the mercenaries, a moment none of us want to see, and essentially losing the tribunal, which is also an undeniably bleak outcome, because there's something really heartwarming about seeing Harry and Kuno team up to finish this case. Again, much like with the rest of the game, Kuno's presence doesn't lead to anything earth-shattering. In fact, being forced to bring him along is a detriment to Harry, as he'll be unable to take a picture of the Phasmid, the cherry on top of closing the craziest case in the history of Martinez. But from an interpersonal perspective, Kuno actually isn't all that bad of a partner. At first, the lack of edge in his voice, a signal of his withdrawal, is jarring, almost haunting to hear. It's some beautiful attention to detail in a game full of so many wonderful character moments like this. But as your time with him progresses, after you meet up with him at the Sea Fortress and explore the ruins, you'll see that he really is trying. He's always got something to say, even if it isn't necessarily informative or even helpful. Normally, a character doing something like this, just responding for the sake of it in an attempt to sound competent, would be annoying. But from Kuno, it's endearing. He wants so desperately to be helpful, to get Harry's approval, the approval any preteen longs for from adults. He can't get it from his father, so he seeks it from Harry. That's why he tries so hard throughout this segment, especially when it comes to interrogating the deserter, at which point he really does do his best to put the screws to him. It's hilarious to see Kuno going through a legitimate cop routine and embracing the role after calling Harry a pig for about 75% of the game. Again, his methods aren't necessarily effective, but with Kuno, it really is the thought and the effort that counts here. After failing to document the appearance of the Phasmid, Harry and Kuno will return to the fishing village, where Kuno will do his absolute best work. He'll put on a passionate defense of Harry, and though it isn't nearly as strong or as well received as Kim's arguments, the appeal to pathos here is pretty remarkable. Despite spending the better part of a week telling Harry that he doesn't care, it's clear that he actually does care, and deeply so. Kuno wants things to work out for Harry, for him to get his act together and rejoin Precinct 41, and he makes it clear with every obscenity-laden line in this segment. It's like the "don't talk to me or my son ever again" meme, but in reverse. Though the focus here is on Kuno's emotional appeals, and rightly so, it's worth noting that he still manages to raise some really strong points. First, that the showdown between the Hardys and the mercenaries was always going to happen, given that Titus and company literally paraded around town taking credit for the murder, and that no matter how you slice it, the folks at Precinct 41 really left Kim and Harry out to dry when they didn't even consider helping them out against trained killers with semi-automatic weapons. Kim doesn't even present these arguments, as valid as they are. Of course, he'd never touch on the latter, but the former is still a strong point. Regardless, both of these arguments display Kuno's street smarts, a sign that he might just be cut out to be a cop after all. Which is a really good thing, because if Harry has stayed sober, he won't just be welcomed back into Precinct 41, he'll take Kuno with him to become a junior officer. Once again, Kuno's argument here is sound. He's been seen out and about working with Harry. He can't go back now. The streets won't accept him. He'll be viewed as a snitch, or worse. Joining up with the Force is the only way forward for him. Of course, there's another emotional appeal here too, as Kuno questions whether or not they'd really subject a kid to such a fate. But it's all true, and sure enough, it works on Harry and the other officers. Kuno's reaction to this news is hilarious. Look at how he practically skips over to the motor carriage and opens the door with the kind of enthusiasm kids his age typically save for their birthday or Christmas morning. It's a stunning sight to see something so characteristically childlike from someone who's seen more evil than any 12-year-old ever should. Taken as a whole, I think the game's message with Kuno is clear. He's a kid who suffered profound trauma. His father's a drunken monster. His best friend is an even more traumatized girl who peer pressures him into doing terrible things, and he prefers nose candy to real candy. In just 12 years of life, he's seen more hardship than you and I ever will. And what a kid like him needs is someone to support them. People who care about them and show it, no matter how messed up they themselves might be. Traumatized people helping other traumatized people, if you will. These days, when it comes to personal growth and recovery, we talk a lot about the importance of getting your own house in order before you can help someone else. But I think there's also something to be said for being willing to lend a hand, even when you aren't at your best. Even when you're bleeding all over the place, and still reeling from a week-long bender. By taking Kuno with him to the Sea Fortress, that's exactly what Harry is doing. Like I said earlier, it's a shame that this path requires sacrificing Kim and a few of the Hardy Boys, because bringing Kuno back to Precinct 41 might be the best thing Harry does during his week in Martinez. Kuno shows Harry that no matter how much he's messed up over the last few years, no matter how many stupid things he said or did while he was drunk, despite his failings in his personal and professional life, he can still help someone who's desperately in need of support. He might say he doesn't care, but what he really wants is what all of us want. Someone to care for us, no matter who it is or how many motor carriages they've crashed. And that's what makes Kuno so important to Disco Elysium. Thanks for watching. Huge shout out to Isla Sound for allowing me to use her Disco Elysium fan music for these videos. Special thanks to all my silver tier YouTube subscribers, including James Pruitt, who get early access to these videos thanks to donations of $5 a month. Next time I cover Disco Elysium, I'll be taking a look at the Hardy Boys and their role in the narrative. But next week, I'll be back with another Night in the Woods theory, as we dive into the cult's most well-known member, Ide. See you guys then!